Hello, and welcome to our session on overcoming obstacles to zero trust. I'm Jason Garbus, founder and principal at Numberline Security and co-chair of the Zero Trust Working Group here at the Cloud Security Alliance. I'm also co-author of the book, Zero Trust Security, an Enterprise Guide. In my various roles, I spent a lot of time thinking about, talking about, asking questions about zero trust, and working with enterprises on helping them understand not just what zero trust is, but the best way, the recommended way for them to get started with it, to move forward with it, and to develop effective zero trust strategies and architectures. This is a really interesting set of conversations. Every enterprise is a little bit different. There are obviously a lot of common themes and trends and technologies and obstacles. And in this keynote, I'm going to be talking about some of those obstacles and ways that we can, as an industry, and you as a security practitioner, overcome those obstacles. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, many of you are probably fans of The Mandalorian like I am, and we also believe that, in fact, zero trust is the way. Zero trust represents the best practices and the combination of principles, architectures, and approaches towards information security. And it builds on our decades of history and decades of areas of success and works to improve in the areas of weakness in our industry. And if we believe that zero trust is the way, this knowledge, in fact, brings with it some obligations, right? We have a responsibility. I really believe that we as security practitioners and security professionals have a responsibility to now really spread the word about zero trust. But if you're working in an enterprise, you have a responsibility to push and pull and drive your enterprise forward with zero trust. We all know that everything that we do is digitized, and everything that our businesses do is dependent on our IT infrastructure, and it's therefore dependent on robust, accurate, and highly available information security. So we really have an obligation to move forward and get our enterprises to adopt zero trust, and of course, to overcome any obstacles that might be in our way. Now, I also want to touch on this notion of productivity versus security. And this is definitely, I would say, a myth. And of course, information security done poorly can impede productivity. There's no doubt about that. But I would argue that anything done poorly can be an impediment to business productivity. And what we have to do is, number one, recognize and change our mindset a little bit that information security is there, of course, to secure the enterprise, but we need to do it in a way that isn't going to be in direct conflict with the business. We need to embrace the fact that our business is utilizing technology and that our job is to make it possible for them to do that safely and securely and efficiently. And we information security need to be involved in almost every aspect of the business because everything is so digital nowadays. And we want to start to change perhaps the perception that the lines of business might have in our organization away from this notion of it being adversarial or information security being an impediment to business productivity, and much more toward it being a partnership. And that's going to take some work on our part, right? We have to build connections with our peers across the industry. We have to learn what's going to be motivating to them in terms of business initiatives or metrics, in terms of measuring things like that. And you'll see me touch on these points a little bit throughout this presentation. But it is important. And I think that if we want to be successful as a security team inside an enterprise, that we do need to do put in that additional effort to step outside the boundaries of what might have been a traditional security role and to begin to engage with the people who are leading and doing the work for our lines of business. And that's ultimately the best way to unlock time and money and energy. And the best way to get things done in our organization is to have the business people behind you. And in a few slides, I'm going to introduce a model around that. That'll help, I think, help you be able to place a security project on this chart and be able to see and think about the right way to approach and talk about it inside your organization and who you have to ally yourself with in order to get things done. And if we now think about the different types of obstacles to zero trust, we've got three general categories around people and process and technology. So let's talk about them one at a time. So people, People can absolutely be resistors to our effort and our initiatives and things that we think need to get done. People are people, right? People are hard to work with sometimes. They have their own agendas. They don't necessarily make completely rational decisions. Sadly, that's the way it is. So the key to think about people is to really understand what their mission is, what their specific responsibilities are, and how it ties to the larger business mission. And putting that together is going to help you really engage with them and get their support to actually get things done. So I mentioned this model here, what I call the security project driver model. And the idea behind this is that this diagram will give you a way to think about where your security projects or your projects that have security aspects are going to fall. So on the left to right axis, you'll see on the left side, there are areas that have a much higher degree of being driven by security. On the right side are projects that are going to have a much higher business driver associated with them. And in the middle, of course, are things that are in the middle. And the vertical axis is intended to help you think about, is this a tactical and technical project? Maybe it's a little bit more narrowly focused and delivers technical benefits versus things that might be executive-led, have strategic business value. Now, clearly, this map, you're going to have projects that are all over this map, and there's no right or wrong place for a given project. It's a nice way for you to think about when you are looking at a project, the degree to which it's going to impact the lines of business and the end users, and therefore the degree to which you need to have their involvement, approval, cooperation, et cetera. And clearly, there are things that might have raise some alarm bells, like if you're doing something that has a significant end user impact, you're asking end users to make some big change in terms of how they operate, but it's only delivering security benefits. That's really going to be more challenging in many cases to push through in the organization versus something that is associated with a business driver, like, hey, we're entering a new market, we're launching a new product, and everyone's on board with that. And of course, everything's going to be different. It's a brand new product. So the fact that there's going to be some new security aspects to it will be not just accepted, but in some cases welcomed. So we think about an example in a fictional organization here. You might have, starting at the left, a OT network segmentation project. This is clearly a pretty technical project, probably not going to impact end users very much because these are mostly factory or OT devices. The network is still going to operate in the same way from the end user perspective. So something that's pretty technical project, pretty tactical, delivers security value, absolutely. But there's, because in this example, there's not a high degree of user interactivity, you don't really need to worry too much about organizational resistance. Going above that, you can see a data backup and restore project. This might be, in this example, driven by an executive, might be a strategic project due to some sort of outage or ransomware incident, for example. This is something that's also fairly technical and doesn't involve end users because it's mostly going to be IT staff. But you probably have, in this example, a little bit more political capital or ability to make changes to applications because of the executive buy-in in this case. In the middle there, you can see a project around the user device upgrade. Clearly, this does impact the end users. Probably users will welcome this, although you never know. Ideally, you would have either an improved user experience or a change to more modern authentication, maybe something that's biometric based that the old devices didn't support, something to help motivate the users so that you don't get resistance of, hey, I like this junky old five-year-old Windows laptop and you're not taking it away from me because it's set up exactly the way I want. And then finally, you might have something that's driven very clearly by a business driver that's strategic, such as a new product or some sort of smart widget that is connected to a new cloud environment that the business is launching. This would clearly be an important investment for the business. It's directly tied to new revenue and new customer acquisition. And the fact that there's security, networking, user experience changes associated with it won't be a problem because it's a brand new environment. So these are examples of either security-led or IT-led or business-led initiatives to help you think about the ways in which a zero trust initiative and security improvements can tie into these types of projects. So when you're thinking about this, when you're trying to overcome some of the people obstacles, definitely talk to people inside your organization. I know we love technology, but a lot of times we need to step outside our desk or the four walls of the virtual data center, whatever it is, really start to understand the business drivers for your organization and the metrics associated with that. So people on the finance team or the manufacturing team or the customer success team, whatever they are, what are they measured on? What areas of friction might they have? And try to understand and learn from your people or from your public filings or just from what you hear in the organization, what business initiatives that are in progress or planned or being considered. And evaluate for those initiatives, how can this zero trust approach to security accelerate the business benefits that are associated with those business initiatives? Those are some of the greatest projects to be involved with because you're delivering something that's directly tied to business value. There's going to be budget and excitement and support and enthusiasm for that versus something that just is perceived as delivering security value and people may not want to change or they just got other priorities. So finally, as you build these connections with peers in the enterprise, just take some time to do some active listening, ask some questions, learn what they're challenged with, where do they have friction in, even in a non-technology perspective, just to try to understand that, because who knows what that'll spark in your mind in terms of, hey, we might be able to do this, and be able to ask, what would this mean to you if questions where if someone, for example, if your company does a lot of mergers and acquisitions, to be able to say, what would it mean to you if on the day after an acquisition closes, we'd be able to give the right people access to the right financial data literally on that same day, instead of waiting 3 weeks for the networks to get remapped or 3 months in some cases? What would it mean to you if we could get our business partners secure access to just the pieces of information, just the data or the resources they need in a day instead of the 3-week process that we have today? What would it mean to you if we could very clearly segregate our data so that now we can get rid of all this compliance reporting headaches and audit findings that happens with our European operations? So these types of things could be really powerful and help you establish partners and supporters and champions for a zero trust initiative in the lines of business. And there's no greater way to start a zero trust initiative or to overcome obstacles than to do that. Let's talk about process. Now, from a security perspective, as a technical individual, we love the idea of a business process that looks like this. It's completely automated. Things are going through and they're all handled exactly the same way. They have a very high degree of quality and uniformity. But I hate to break it to you, but business processes aren't like this. Business processes, as we know, are really messy. And even though almost everything we're doing is digitized and driven by IT and driven by computer systems, that business processes are not going to be fully modeled, fully automated, and fully modelable in a completely automated way. Business processes are a lot like this. You've got people working really hard. Maybe they're breaking a sweat. There's manual handoffs. Sometimes things get dropped. And the computer systems that we build and the security systems around them have to be able to handle that without sacrificing things. And the reality is that some business processes are really like this, very custom. Maybe they're pretty slow, very high stakes, a lot of investment in them. And while things might be documented, they're not going to be repeatable or automated. Now, clearly, in this example, there's literally just one spacecraft that the engineers here at NASA are building, and it's not going to be a process that's repeated or repeatable, although there are repeatable parts of it. The key is really to think about and understand where you can apply automation, what parts of the process are manual, and that's okay, and to help us think about ways in which we can really improve that. And in fact, I would argue that with zero trust, you can really think outside the proverbial security box of, okay, all we care about is authentication and authorization, and everything else is someone else's job. And the reality is that zero trust as a security philosophy is about tying into all of the technology that people are using to perform their job. So it is really beneficial to you working for your enterprise to understand the different roles that people have and the ways that they use computer systems, because every computer system has to have security and access associated with it. And that can really help us collaborate with those individuals to do things like look at an employee onboarding process that perhaps in one enterprise I work with, it took them over 3 weeks to provision and ship a new laptop to a new employee. Because of various technical restrictions, they still had an old on-premises directory system. It had to get shipped to headquarters, turned on and set up on the network, and then shipped out to the individual. They used the zero trust access method to now just drop ship the computer directly to the new employee. It was pre-provisioned with an image that had network access just to the on-premises Active Directory system. So it really shrunk this process from about 3 weeks to about 3 or 4 days. That was a big win for this organization, as they were of pretty significant size, and they were onboarding between 75 and 100 employees every month. So that's kind of one way to think about this. And don't fight the process, but work with the process. Think about ways in which technology can accelerate it, and understand that there's going to be some manual processes, and there's going to be areas that we just have to accept either some friction or whatever compromises we make, hopefully not on security, but to really understand the process from a business perspective and see what security can do to improve that. Now, we get to our favorite part, technology, right? I do hate to break it to you, but technology really is the least important part of this, even though it's super important and it's got to work and it's really complex and interesting. In many cases, it really is the least important part of this. Now, if we think about this, this is the world we live in, right? We work on the security side. We have to understand pretty deeply how all this stuff works and work closely with our IT counterparts. And we see many times challenges such as the organization has not invested in updating or upgrading technology. Maybe there's technical debt because things haven't been patched or updated or replaced. And the organization maybe hasn't invested in the people or technology to take advantage of modern tools and systems. Maybe there's a lot of traditional on-prem systems that really should be replaced with cloud-based systems, but that's a lot of work. It's additional budget, and maybe the organization just hasn't decided to prioritize that. Another common challenge around technology is lack of visibility. A lot of enterprises, especially ones that have been around for a while, the organizations don't have a high degree of visibility or trust in whatever information they do have about what's running on their network. And that's a real challenge, right? From a monitoring perspective, from just a reliability perspective, as well as from a security perspective. That's a problem that has to be overcome. But the good news is that with the zero trust approach, you can, in fact, I'd argue, you should approach it incrementally. Don't try to say, okay, we've got 5,000 servers on the network, and we don't know what half of them do. Therefore, we need to do a giant inventory and get perfect data before we can start building our first zero trust policy. That's going to be a giant project and not deliver any business value for a really long time. You'd be much better off to say, okay, we're in that situation, but for these 20 servers, for these 20 resources, we know what they are because maybe they were created recently, maybe they're high value, and we know which users need to access those 20 resources. Fantastic. We're going to take that one transaction flow, that one slice, and make sure that that access is locked down, only goes through our zero trust policy enforcement point. And we have a set of zero trust policies around that, which require that those 20 users get properly authenticated, they're using a corporate managed device, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're delivering business value because hopefully those 20 users have had issues or problems or friction associated with that access. You fix that for them. They're happy. You've got some momentum for your zero trust project, and you haven't had to solve that giant problem of not knowing what's on your network. And then you can go to the next project and the next project after that. Same thing for the last challenge around the complexity of IT environments. I get this. I spent a lot of time working with enterprises that have huge variability in their environment, and they've got 27 different vendors for each category of thing, and it's very, very complicated. And that's okay, right? That's just the world that we live in. There can and there should be an effort to simplify some of that. That's not definitely not an overnight type of thing. And the idea behind zero trust is that it does help this. So if we think about this complexity, look at all the resources on the bottom of this diagram. huge variety in terms of the types of technologies and locations and use cases and things like that. And the idea behind Zero Trust is that you have a set of policy enforcement points that control access into that very heterogeneous environment. And you have a Zero Trust policy model that acts as a simplifying layer across all of those. Really, what you want to get to is to have a single platform that controls all of your access. Now, you're going to build this up over time, but this is a vision. And that policy model uniformly applies for all your users, for all your services, et cetera. And it's also tied into your enterprise set of infrastructure for additional context to make better informed policy decisions, as well as events to make more real-time types of decisions around this. Now, there's a lot behind this model, and if you study Zero Trust and you started to work on it, you understand how some of this ties together. But the idea is that what Zero Trust allows you to do is to simplify things, because you're defining policies that bridge between the networking, the application, and the identity layers. We've never really had that before, and that's part of the real power of Zero Trust, is to help define policies that are easy to understand, can be delegated to line of business owners, are easily understandable, easily writable, and simplify things for you and for the operations team. So to wrap up here, Zero Trust can and should, in fact, I'd argue, must be used to improve your enterprise security. This is the way. This is the best way that we know to deliver security. And it delivers demonstrable security value and business value. And done well, it can really help improve your enterprise. It's not a silver bullet. It's going to take some work, and that's okay, right? We shouldn't be afraid of hard work. We live in a complicated world. There are significant and ever-present adversaries out there, and it's up to us to defend our organizations, our data, and our economy, our way of life, really, against these adversaries. But done well, and we've certainly seen examples of that in the industry, Zero Trust can help you overcome almost any obstacle. So with that, I want to encourage you to learn some more about Zero Trust, to really adopt it, to drive in your organization, focus on doing it incrementally, step by step, deliver value every day, every week, and every month, and we'll get there together. So with that, I want to thank you. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm available through my website as well. I also want to thank the Cloud Security Alliance for this opportunity. Thank you.